talking about when he came years ago. Am I on? Okay. That you were all strangers to him, and I had that same experience when we first started here. Unlike Daniel, the longer I come, the stranger you get. I'm just...
Vice versa.
Yeah, pardon me?
Vice versa.
Yes, exactly. But remember, the idea of holiness means we're strange, we're other, we're unique. So that's a good thing. I actually complimented you. Yeah, Paul did ask me to talk a little bit about orphans, and I threw in some things here about some widows too. I hope you don't mind. Because there are some very practical things you can be doing. Of course, what's the first one, Ruth? Come to Ghana. And you can take care of little orphans, and you can hold them and play with them. It's just a... But
It's a given.
Yeah, exactly. But have you ever thought of doing foster care? That's how Debbie and I first got into this whole arena of Mercy Ministry. It was during the times when the Right to Life people were making a big splash in Milwaukee. And Debbie and I started talking about it, and we decided we weren't the kind that were going to cement ourselves inside of a Volkswagen Bug to protest. But one of the accusations that the pro-choice people made against us, especially as Christians, is you're only interested in saving the baby's life. You don't care about that child once they're outside the abortion clinic. And we looked at each other and said, to a large degree, they're right. We want to save their life, and that's good. But what are we doing to help them to have a life after their mother chooses to not abort them? And that's when Debbie and I first got involved in doing foster care, and led to we adopted 3 children, and then it led us into our ministry in Ghana. So give that some thought. Ask yourself that. But there's some of you who are already saying, well, I'm at a point in life, or we're not as a family in a position where we can do that right now. Well, how about as a church then, having a day where you do a respite ministry? Anybody who has foster kids, bring them to the church. We'll watch them so that you as the foster mom, foster dad can spend some time refreshing yourselves. We can tell you firsthand, it gets a little overwhelming because a lot of these kids come with baggage that you can't even believe even a little child can have. And so that was just a thought that came to my mind. How about some of you are like me, we're getting gray. How about adopting a child, so to speak? Not adopting, well, adoption is the second option as well. But I'm saying adopt a family who has some orphan children they're caring for, and being that person. Maybe you're the grandpa that child doesn't have, or the grandma that child doesn't have. And you can provide that kind of a help to someone in need. When I'm talking about respite care, we can also talk about that as far as elderly people that don't have a spouse around anymore, they're alone. Well, what about as a church having a day where you come together and you have I was talking about this with my wife, you have an inning instead of an outing. You don't have to take them somewhere. Welcome them to the church. Have a game day, have a movie, have a dinner for them. I have a friend down in Virginia. He's a retiree, and he himself is he's in his 70s. But once a month, he just invites people to the church and he cooks for them. Just has he's a wonderful cook. And they have a great meal together. And oftentimes he'll have somebody come in and speak to them about different issues. But there's things like that. Or 2 weeks ago, we went and saw Birdie. Birdie, if you're listening to this on TV, plug your ears right now. But think of Birdie as a widow. I appreciate that Paul included men that have lost a spouse as widow. We call them widowers sometimes, but they're widows. And here's a gentleman who has been a faithful servant of the Lord, and now he sits in a nursing home 24/7. And I'm telling you, that man's lonely. And maybe it's time to, and not just Birdie, I'm using him as an example. You probably have other people that you know of as a church who are in the same situation. Maybe it's putting together a monthly schedule where a couple times a week somebody from the church goes and visits them. And you might think, well, it's kind of awkward. Well, find out what he likes to do. Maybe he likes to play cribbage, or maybe he likes to play backgammon or something. He'd probably do mahjong because he's kind of from out in the Eastern Asia part of the world. But play a game or bring him a vanilla milkshake. That's a big one for Birdie. Bring him a vanilla milkshake. So there's lots of things. I wish I had time, that we had time. We could just sit down for a half an hour or 45 minutes and say, let's brainstorm on some things. Because it's really, really not that difficult if you just take the time and start thinking, what could I do for orphan children? How could I get involved? Is it through foster care? Is it for us actually saying, well, Lord, maybe you want us to adopt a child? Or maybe it's my uncle and aunt. They have an RV, they're retired, and so for they snowbird down to Florida. But they park their RV at a place, and I'm trying to remember the name of it. I think I have it written down here somewhere. Remember the name of the place, Deb? Hope, yeah. Yes, there it is. Hope Children's Home is the actual name. It's in Tampa, Florida. And I'm not saying this is the only organization, but this organization has a place for RVs. So they snowbird down, park their RV, spend their winter months hanging out with the children. My uncle plays the guitar, and so he's teaching some of the children in the children's home how to play guitar. The children's home just got a donation from Gibson, the guitar company. So he's teaching these kids how to play a guitar, and he can't afford the guitars that the kids are playing because these are $1,000 guitars that were donated to these kids. But it's a way that in their declining years, if we want to call them that, in their retirement years, they're investing in the lives of children. There are all kinds of agencies around that are dealing with children. And it just takes you asking the Lord, and there you are. And if you can't come up with something, ask Ruth to come pray for you, and then you will. Lord, what can I do? There's kids out there that just need to be loved. You know, the word worship that Paula has been talking about, I looked that up too years ago. And it does have the idea of worship, but in its formal sense. Isaiah 58 talks about how Israel was doing everything right in worship. They were praying, they were fasting, they were getting on their faces before the Lord, they were humbling themselves, they were seeking the Lord, and God said, that's not what I'm asking for. He said, the homeless are still homeless. The widows are still not being cared for. The orphans are still not being cared for. And that's when James comes in and he says, true religion, the true outpouring or the expression of our worship is to care for widows and orphans. And why? Why can he say that? It's because what Paul referred to. In Galatians, Paul tells us that the whole law, that means everything in the Old Testament, boils down to one thing: loving your neighbor as yourself. Now, Jesus said it, there was two: love the Lord your God and love your neighbor. Now, why can Paul turn around and say it's only one? I think it's because of something else Jesus said. When you do it to one of the least of these, you're doing it to me. When you're loving on some of these orphan kids, you are loving Jesus. You're accomplishing both of those commands, those summary commands, in one action. as you love those kids in Jesus' name, you are loving Jesus himself. It's not, he doesn't say it's like you're loving me. He says, you're doing it to me. So that's what I would encourage you to do. Spend some time in prayer. Think about it. I'd love to talk to you more about it if that can help. I'm sure Paul or Daniel could do the same thing. And I'm pretty sure that they wouldn't get real mad if a group of you got together and said, we're going to arrange something to take care of some orphan kids for a day at the church. Just don't make it cost any money to the church and they'll be happy. Okay?
We actually have money.
There you go. He's got the money waiting for you. What's your excuse? All right. Thank you.
For guidance. Can we encourage each other in those things? You know, as you meet in small groups, as you fellowship with each other, as you have each other over for meals, get into those discussions. Do some brainstorming. Explore those things. Shall we do that? Let's pray.
Paul?
Yes.
Can I say one
Yeah,
more
yeah,
thing?
please.
I'm sorry.
Yep. No, that's okay. We're good. The bottom.
Up there it is.
Yep.
This statistic didn't, stay right up here, because that's not wrong. It didn't occur to me until I sat down, but about 10 years ago, a statistic came out for the United States and children that need a home. And the statistic was this: if two families out of every evangelical church would adopt one child, we would have no more need in the United States. 2 families for every church that would call themselves an evangelical church. And that was just, wow, that's a doable thing.